All. This is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So, the discussion today is about the UK Technical Brief number 34, which recently came out. I think yesterday it came out or somewhere recently. It has data about Omicron, and it has the data about vaccine efficacy, boosters efficacy, infections, previous infections efficacy, and the Omicron. And I thought this was really interesting data. A couple of things in that in that technical brief. One, they said that some data parts are still crude, they are still being processed, they're still raw, and more refinement will come in the future briefings. So let's look at that. I thought, if you have a question in your mind, which is something like, with Omicron, what are vaccines doing? With Omicron, if somebody is boosted, what are their what is the improvement in efficacy at all? And the most important, which was my own question as well, how long? If you take a booster today for Omicron, how long after you would need one more booster, and then one more booster, and then one more booster? You would see that for case prevention, remember, case is a different situation, and hospitalization, death is a different situation. For case prevention, you would see in the data that almost every second or third month a booster would be needed. However, I don't think that we should look at boosters and vaccines just for the case prevention. Although case prevention helps, when the cases are less, load on hospitals are less as well. So that is an interesting data point. And then the other question that I had in my mind was, if somebody was accidentally infected, and those folks who think that when I talk about previous infection, for example, yesterday we talked about the CDC study, and people said, do I not know that infections are a bad thing? Yes, I think CDC also knows that the infections are a bad thing. But these are data points that are interesting to know. So let's discuss this um, situation. It's really, really cool. So this is drbeen.com. This is the technical brief number 34. And this is their severity assessment. In this is now UK and their health security agency. They are saying here, before folks would go go off on me saying, why do you say the severity is less? Look at this green box over here. This is the risk assessment by the UK's health security agency, and they're saying infection severity adults, green. And there, if you read this paragraph, available data, I'm reading the last part, the second paragraph, available data suggests that the observed reduction in risk of hospitalization in adults is likely to be partly a reduction in intrinsic severity of the virus and partly to protection provided by the prior infection. So it is very interesting to note. This is the document that we're going to go over. I have highlighted some of this as well. So if you see here, there are some pieces that are interesting, and so I have them here. So we'll go over these. So now my summary. I wanted to make sure that we can actually read this together. So I did not draw too much because I wanted the points to come across. So first, no disclosure. This is my painting that I did in December. It's called Let's Go There. It is digital water done in realistic paint studio. So we are living in Omicron world, B1529, although B1529 or BA2 is now in the US as well. So it looks like BA2 is going to continue to dominate. Medical disclaimer, not a medical advice. It's really informational and educational. So let's start. So in this technical brief, they have a study of people, almost about 1 million people. And what they did was, in the study, they are looking at the vaccine efficacy of Delta and the vaccine versus Omicron and the vaccine. And they look at vaccine, one dose, two dose, and then boosted. Then they also look at booster with variations. For example, somebody had AstraZeneca and then they have Moderna. What does that do? So it is an interesting document to read. The study that they have, the data that they have, it is test negative That means they didn't actually test everyone involved. Symptom positive. So these are symptomatic cases for which they have the data. It is a case control study, 18 plus years of age, and it is for 2 dose and 3 dose vaccination. Now, they said that data size was small, so they did not really separately look at all the efficacies, but in many cases, they pulled all the data together for various vaccines and showed that together. In the case of Delta, they had 236,023 cases, and in the case of Omicron, they had 760,647 cases. So, although they said it is a small data size, it's a very decent data size. The case definition, that who is a case of COVID, either they did, and case of Delta versus Omicron. So, either they had done a complete genomic sequencing, or they had genotyping done, or they had S gene target failure test done. So, whichever way they could figure out that this is Delta versus Omicron, that is how they looked at it. This summary first. So, if you just wanted to see what is a summary, the summary is this. This is from the document itself. These estimates suggest that vaccine effectiveness against symptomatic disease, symptomatic, not asymptomatic, against symptomatic disease with the Omicron variant is significantly lower. So, effectiveness is lower than compared to the Delta variant and wane rapidly. So, we know this kind of a message already as well. So, now the question is how low? That is what we're going to look at the stats. Nevertheless, protection against hospitalization is much greater, in particular after a booster dose, where vaccine effectiveness against hospitalization is around 85 to 90%. Further data is needed to estimate the duration of protection. So, important thing to keep in mind as we look at the remaining summaries. For the Omicron, they have gone up to January, I believe, 6 or something like that. So they still have a few more weeks data to be pulled together. So as more data comes in, they would be able to say that, hey, vaccine boosters effectiveness after 10 weeks or after 20 weeks or after so on. At this time, they can only show effectiveness up to 10 weeks after the booster because a lot of time has not passed. Now, a couple of comments that I pulled out of the documents, which were my own questions as well, and I was looking around too. Boosted individuals' protection against symptomatic cases drops to 50% or less after 10 plus weeks. So, this is if you just wanted to leave the whole thing and just understand one outcome, at least that was one outcome that I wanted to know. And that is, if I got a booster today, although now I have the infection, so I don't need a booster. If I got a booster today from a symptomatic case, for a symptomatic case, how long am I protected? So by 10th week, about 2.5 months later, the efficacy of the vaccine booster to protect me from a symptomatic case drops down to 50% or lower. Remember that the acceptable efficacy is 64% and above. That is where we started. So that means if you just are trying to use boosters to prevent cases, which could be if let's say the idea is to flatten the curve and have not have enough number of cases or lots of cases that would burden the hospitalization or the hospital system, then boosters may be needed again and again. And how frequent, at least on this data point, 2.5 months later or 3 months later, a booster is needed. I think that is impractical. I don't think that is going to work. But that is for the symptomatic case. I think we, Cool Beans, should shift our focus towards hospitalization. So we'll look at that too. Boosted individuals' protection against hospitalization stays 83% at 10 plus week. And why can't they say 20 plus weeks? Because they don't have enough time spent after the boosters in people. Omicron is new. But even after 10 plus week, what you're seeing is actually it is dropping. So 10 plus week, it is it has dropped to 83%. Still good, but I think it would drop further. So they might come back for 20 plus week and say that once again looks like booster loses its efficacy within 20 plus weeks. So we'll see. I am just making that conjecture. So this is it. This is the summary of it. Now let's look at the little more data. So this is the data for symptomatic cases. So somebody who's vaccinated with um, CHAdOX1, which is AstraZeneca, or with Moderna, or with Pfizer, or a combination. Here is the data for their symptomatic cases. So AstraZeneca, 2 doses, 40 to 50% to almost zero in 20 weeks after the second dose. I want to show you this graph. This is such an interesting graph to look at. So let me here actually here. So check this out. Look at this graph. Look at the left side. The black boxes and the whiskers, or this data, black are for Delta and the vaccine efficacy for them. The gray, rounded gray circles below are for Omicron. And check this out. This is the AstraZeneca. When AstraZeneca is given, so let's say I received 2 doses of AstraZeneca, and after the 2 doses, they have started measuring the efficacy. And down below here is the number of weeks. So 2 to 4 weeks, 5 to 9 weeks, 10 to 14 weeks, and so on. Look at the efficacy drop. This is 2 doses. It starts at about 40, 42 or 43. So it already starts at a very low level. And then it just continues to drop. And by 20 plus weeks, it has dropped to zero. So that is one. Symptomatic cases. If the person is boosted after receiving the 2 doses of AstraZeneca and a booster is given, and for example, this one is BioNTech, which is Pfizer, and then the right column is Moderna. If you see here, if they are boosted, again, data is lesser. This is not 20 plus weeks, it is 10 plus weeks. And here it starts again from 60% and then goes up and down and finally is reaching downwards towards 40. This is boosters efficacy dropping within 10 weeks, below 50-ish. And this is Moderna. Moderna's efficacy is dropping to 60% in 5 to 9 weeks. So boosters for symptomatic cases are less effective, although I'll repeat this. When you prevent or reduce a symptomatic case, you also reduce the possibility of hospitalization, so kind of flatten the curve for some time. And there are other methods as well for this, but I wanted to share this chart. Now, if I go to the next page, here, this is the Pfizer. So look at Pfizer's data. Similar data, the black boxes are the Delta and the gray circles are Omicron. So when Pfizer's primary series is given, 2 doses, and I believe that UK does an interval between the doses. So I've heard some doctors talking about maybe the interval between the doses should be more and that would produce a better efficacy. You can see that against Omicron, even after the UK's dilated time window, the efficacy starting from 60 for Pfizer, and within 5 to 9 weeks after the second dose, it is dropping towards 50 and then below 40, and within 20 weeks plus, it has reached what, 10 for symptomatic cases. If Then Pfizer is given another Pfizer booster. Then the efficacy again, I believe it hovers near 60 and then drops below 60 after 10 plus weeks. Meaning, meaning a person would start looking at one more booster if we want to prevent symptomatic cases. And in some cases, we would want to, but in not every case. And if you look at then Moderna given after Pfizer 2 doses, then the efficacy stays above 60. So that is Pfizer. And keeping up with this one, this is the Moderna. So if you see here, Moderna, again, black boxes are Delta, gray circles are Omicron. Moderna, when it is given with two primary series, no boosting, it starts at about 73-4% efficacy. So that is a good efficacy, but it also drops down almost towards 10 to 0 to 20 range here within 20 plus weeks. So all vaccines within 20 weeks against Omicron, they lose their efficacy. And that is because they're weaned. Now, if they are boosted, again, if you see here, the data is less, only 2 to 4 weeks data. So there's not sufficient data to make a decision. But if they are boosted, if Moderna primary series is boosted with Pfizer, they stay above 60. If it is boosted with Moderna, they stay above 60. So now if I go back to my summary document, AstraZeneca, 2 doses after, within 20 weeks, becomes zero efficacy. This is vaccine. So if you're wondering, here I had AstraZeneca, it's 20 plus weeks. What is my efficacy from symptomatic cases? Zero. Pfizer or Moderna, 2 doses, 65 to 70% start, down to 0 to 10% in 20 plus weeks. So if you had Pfizer or Moderna and you're thinking, hey, 20 plus weeks later, what is my efficacy against Omicron? Then this is what it is. I would continue to balance it with this here. As soon as I say it with my mouth, people go after me. So I'm just showing it to you from the health agency, where they're saying that the reduction in severity is because of the intrinsic severity of the virus is reduced, plus prior infection is helpful. Okay, so now what is the takeaway then? Boosters efficacy. Boosters efficacy. Also below the acceptable range after 10 plus weeks, 45 to 50. Okay, going to continue. Now, this is the important one against hospitalization. So we are comparing Delta to Omicron. That is why we are able to do the efficacy discussion, because we're comparing two things. So the vaccine effectiveness against hospitalization. This is the table which I directly took from their document because it's really beautifully laid out. The way to look at this is, for us, the first column is the number of doses. Second columns, the week after the dose. So if you have taken a vaccine, just think about it, which vaccine you have taken, how many doses, and how many weeks since that second dose or first dose. And the last column is the efficacy. I'm going to leave the odds ratios and hazard ratio. I'm just going to go to vaccine efficacy, which is a math on these two ratios. So check this out. One dose, and then 4 weeks later, about a month after one dose, efficacy against hospitalization is 58% compared to Delta. So if Delta's efficacy was, let's say, 74%, here we have an efficacy lower. So when Delta's efficacy was measured, that was against the placebo, for example, or the previous variant. Here we are comparing Delta with the Omicron. So efficacy 58%, and the range, if you see, 37 to 72%. So someone who is gotten one dose of any vaccine, then from hospitalization's point of view, they have 58% effectiveness of the vaccine, which is good. 2 doses, and then 2 to 24 weeks after the 2 doses, right? So, for example, my case, Moderna, 2 doses in somewhere like May or before May, I believe, and then 20 plus weeks after, about 5 months after. What is the efficacy? 44% against Omicron. So I was in this cohort, I was in this risk area. And again, age and comorbidities would also factor in. 3 doses, 2 to 4 weeks. So now we're talking about the boosted people. 2 to 4 weeks, about half a month to 1 month after the third dose. Efficacy is 92% for hospitalization. Symptomatic cases is a different story. We saw that. Hospitalization, 92%. 5 to 9 weeks, almost the next month. So, first month, 92% protection. Next month, protection drops to 88%. Not a lot, 4 points. And then 10 plus, and they don't have more data to say 20 or 25 plus. So, 10 plus drops to 83%. So, this is really within another, as soon as the third month is starting of a boosted person, the vaccine's protection for hospitalization drops to 83% efficacy or effectiveness. Still good, but dropping. So, my suspicion is that as they collect more data and present it, by 20 plus percent, it would have gone down to 60, 65 ish. Still good, but rapidly going down. Now, Pfizer has said that they are trialing a vaccine that is targeted for Omicron. The question really is that will we need to have boosters for everyone? I don't think that we need to have boosters for everyone. I think boosters will be selectively be given to some. Now, this is another very interesting uh, point, which I really loved it. And let me just quickly show you the document itself. So if I go to further, so this is that table I just showed you. If I go to infection, so this document has another couple of points. One is infection rate in vaccinated and unvaccinated, and the other one is in reinfection rate. So I'm going to present infection rate. It's fascinating actually. Let's see if you pick up what I found interesting. So here is this is the table. I'm going to go to my table because I have marked something on it. So this is December 1 to January 4th data from UK. And look at this. So I'm going to read some part of it. This is very interesting. So this is the infection rate in unvaccinated or 2-dose vaccinated or boosted vaccinated. So let's start from the left side. No previous infection. This is a similar data as we did the CDC study. No previous infection, and vaccine status on 30th November was 2-dose or 3-dose. So by that time they were looking at it. So December and January 6th is the time in which they are looking at the data. The unvaccinated are taken as a reference. The cases in unvaccinated are taken as a reference, although they have shown that number as well. So if you see here, number of infections 21, and crude incidence rate per 10,000 is 108.5. So keep this in mind. This is the reference. Below that is the vaccinated 2-dose. So no previous infection, just 2-dose vaccinated. I'm saying just, meaning this is the normal, regular thing, right? 2-dose vaccinated. Efficacy 73.4%. Oh, sorry, 73.4 are the number of cases per 10,000. The effectiveness is on the right column, 32% effectiveness. So not great. 3 doses, that is boosted. Cases count per 10,000 is 41.6, and the effectiveness goes up to 62%. Good. So keep an eye on the total number as well, 108.5 per 10,000 person days. So they're observing people for this time, and this is what they're finding. Now check out prior infection, the lower part. Prior infection, again, somebody who's unvaccinated but had an infection before, or 2 dose or 3 dose. Check this out. Prior infection unvaccinated. That means just the previous infection. Look at the number of cases per 10,000 person days. 60.9. 60.9. Compare that to the table above. 2 dose vaccinated, same 10,000 person days, 73.4 cases. And just previous infection, no vaccination, 60.9. Vaccine effectiveness, or this previous infection's effectiveness, 44%. 2 dose vaccines effectiveness, 32%. That was very interesting for me. Then if you go down to the vaccinated 2 dose, so now this is a person who was previously infected plus 2 dose vaccinated. Their case is 43.5 per 10,000 person days. So in 10,000 person days, the cases were 43.5. Vaccines effectiveness is 60%, which is good. If you look at the table above, this 60% effectiveness in previously infected is almost equal to boosted persons' vaccine effectiveness. So the previous infection is kind of acting as a booster. If a booster is given as well, so that would be the fourth exposure of the body, then look at it, 31 per 10,000 person days, and the effectiveness is 71%. So there were many comments yesterday asking me that why am I saying that previous vaccine is infection is robust, and saying, don't I understand that infections are bad? I understand that, we're seeing it. However, this is data, and it is interesting to see the data as well. It is interesting to know that there are about 1 million people who have died in the US, sadly. And then there are millions of people who have become infected and recovered. This is their effectiveness. This is their data. We cannot just start hiding the data. So data has to be presented. I think we all have to be wise about it. Don't go out, look for the infection. It is lethal. It can be lethal. It can be bad. But at least look at the data. It's very interesting data. So in here, they also then talk about reinfections. So reinfections, their definition of reinfection is an infection that occurred another time after 90 days of the previous infection. And the data is interesting, but much of this data was really within the Delta timeframe. Some of this was for the Omicron. Check this one out, for example, age profile of first episode of infection and possible reinfection, 90 plus day interval between sequential positive test results with Omicron, 1 November to 30 December. Look at the age profile. So this solid blue line is the first infection. So for example, if I look at this 27, 30 year, 24, 27, 30, 33 years of age had this first infection. So if you see on the right side, total possible reinfection episodes, and on the left side, total infection, first infection episodes. So on the left side is the number here, I believe, for the blue line. And then on the right side are the numbers for the reinfection. And it is interesting to see that the reinfections are more frequent in ages starting from 18 and going up to 51, 57, 60. But main cluster is between 80 to 30-ish, 18 to 30-ish. That's very interesting. Similarly, this is the other case. Age profile of the first episode of infection, September to October, and possible reinfection with Omicron, 1st November to 30 December, with a 60 to 89-day interval. So the previous chart was 90 plus days. This is 60 to 89. So to look at this data, you can say, all right, my age is 30 years. I had an infection in, let's say, September to October timeframe. What is my risk with the other people with similar age between November to December? How are they looking? So if you see here, excuse me. So the possible reinfection is green, and first infection is that blue, kind of this black line. So the first infection, again, more in 9, 12, 15, 18 years of age, and reinfection also in the similar um, cohort. And if you look at this one, this is age profile of first episode of infection, September to October timeframe, and a possible reinfection with Omicron, 1 November to 30 December, with a 29 to 59-day interval. So infection to reinfection, about a month to 2 months. And you can see that here, the reinfection cases are in orange, and they have gone beyond the infection side as well. The other charts were kind of matching up. So this is the data for me that I wanted to present. Interesting thing for me is that the boosters are for symptomatic cases. I do not think that boosters are something to talk about for symptomatic cases. They are useful from a policy point of view to say we want to keep the cases under control, because whoever becomes symptomatic, there are chances of someone to become hospitalized from them. So reducing the symptomatic cases would help reduce the hospitalization as well. All right, makes sense. However, booster for everyone also do not make sense. So I think there should be a selective process, and I believe UK and Europe have many. In the US here, we are kind of more broader in our approach. So this is the discussion. Thank you very much for your time. Let me just quickly see if there is any. Yeah, so Rima is working with me. So there is a comment about Israel's data. Rima is working with me, and we'll put together another set of data for various countries and vaccine and boosters as well. So thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, and share. And if you would like to support this work, there are links in the description. You can check them out and you can support if you want. I'm going to come back in a few minutes, and we can either do a chit chat, or I wanted to share with us various data points from our world in data, US, UK, Israel. And interestingly, Switzerland, US have started feeding the data to our world in data, which is hospitalizations and cases by age, and by vaccination. So if you're interested, we can go over that. Cool. So see you in a few minutes.